In this video, we are going to learn about how to use outbound messages core action inflow and send data to an external system. So this is a typical integration use case where you wanted to send data, Salesforce data to an external system. It could be anything. So basically, uh, there are multiple approaches to solve this. We can do customization. We can write our own custom code and then send data to the external system. But using outbound messages is one of the simplest way to send data to the external system. So all we need is we need to configure the endpoint of the receiving system, and then send data from Salesforce. You will just see how we can do everything right in this video. So you will learn how to configure and manage outbound messages. You will also configure a test endpoint. So I don't have a system right now which will receive the data. Instead, I'm going to use a test endpoint. We do have a lot of online platforms which gives you an endpoint for us to test this outbound messages. So we will be using one of the platforms to test our endpoint, and we just post data from Salesforce, to that endpoint, and then check whether the data is being received at the test endpoint. So we will use outbound core messages to send the data, to make a call, to send the data to the test endpoint. And also we will run this in an asynchronous fashion. So we don't want to do it in a synchronous fashion because we are dealing with external system. So in case if something goes wrong in the endpoint, the test endpoint for some reason it is down, we don't want to break the main chain of actions. So that's why we wanted to use run async option, which is supported in Flow. We will also check on how to use that. And also we will use common functions like is new to figure out whether is it a new record being created or is it an existing record. So we will just do that. We'll just see that with a business use case.
We'll just start with the use case and then see how we can able to put everything in action. So this is the business use case for us to resolve. A chief sales officer of Unicorn Limited. So he would like to enable integration with Salesforce and other systems in the organization, especially HR, legal, and finance departments. So there is a new process in place which demands that whenever a new customer or an account is created, the account type has to be updated as prospect. Besides that, the account details should be sent to a system, especially the system managed by the legal team, which is built in Java. So the details should be sent to the legal team for validation or customer profile validation. Typically, when a new prospect is added or a customer is added in the system, the legal team will run a background check about the customer, their financial status, their legal defaults if there are any. So all such things the legal team will take care and then provide guidance to the sales team. Hence, there is a need to send all the account information to the legal team, and this is where we need integration because this legal system is built in Java. So from Salesforce, whenever a new customer is created, we got to send all the details, required details to this legal system. So to enable this integration, what the developers of this legal system, right, they did is they expose a service endpoint. So we are going to post all the new accounts as and when it is created to this endpoint. Thereby, the legal team can able to see the data and then further, right, start with the customer profiling. So as a Salesforce admin, you're going to do that using Flow without writing any single line of code. Let's see how it is done. So this is the expected output. When a new account is created, on create, we're going to post the details like account name, account revenue, annual revenue, billing address, etc., to a service endpoint. So to demonstrate this, we will be creating an endpoint using one of the online platforms where we can quickly create an API, a service endpoint, which we can use it to post the data to check this one. So this is the outbound message that we're going to configure. Yeah, and this will help us to post the data to the service endpoint. We'll just see each step one at a time. And yeah, so this is the flow. And as you have seen in the requirement, there are two things we need to do. One is whenever a new account is created, isn't it? Whenever a new account is created, we got to update the type as prospect. So that is part one. Part two is we also have to post the data to the service endpoint, isn't it? And this is where this is the classic case or a good candidate for running a flow asynchronously, because we're going to talk to an external system via a service endpoint, isn't it? What if the service endpoint is down? We don't want the core action, right? Or the core steps to get failed, correct? So we wanted to just separate this dependency, right, out of the list of things that we need to complete, core actions to be completed. So this becomes the right candidate for running the flow asynchronously. So we got to branch this out into two different tracks. One is run immediately, other one is run asynchronously. So when a new customer is created, isn't it? We will just check whether it is a new customer, existing customer, and if it's a new customer, we will just update the customer type as prospect. Once this is completed, once this is completed, Salesforce will automatically pick up the list of steps that is configured inside in the run asynchronous branch, and then it will just start executing. So once this is done, Salesforce will automatically switch and then start using this outbound message to post the data to the external service endpoint. So this is what we're going to configure in the flow. So let's quickly go back. Let's first try to create a flow. Or before we do that, let's try to create an outbound message. So there are multiple ways in which we can enable integration between Salesforce and other systems. So outbound message is just one of the integration approaches, which helps us to just enable this integration with just clicks and no coding. So let me just click on outbound message. Let's click on continue. So I'm going to click create a new outbound message. So now in our requirement, we got to post data, isn't it, to a service endpoint, right? So first, let me just create a outbound message for account object because I want to post account data, isn't it, to the service endpoint. Say next. So I'll just give a name. I'll just say send new customer data to legal system. That's going to be the name of the flow. And we'll come back to the service endpoint URL. So I would like to send the details. I can just choose what details I would like to send it to the endpoint. So I want the account number, I want the account source, I want the annual revenue, I would like to send the billing city, country, state, street, enter billing address. And what else? I want to send the name of the account as well. So for now, let's see, let's just send these details to the legal team. Yeah. So we got to configure the endpoint URL. So right now we don't have a Java, application, etc. to test this one. Instead, what we can do is, right, we can just use one of the online platforms that gives us, right, that gives service endpoint for testing. So there are multiple platforms available. One that I'm going to use for our testing is webhook.site. So you can also use request bin. That is also another platform that helps you to request.bin. That will also help you to, yeah. So request bin, this will also help you to to create a service endpoint which you can use it for testing your outbound messages. So let's so this is straightforward website, a book.site. So the moment you launch this one, right, this will just give you a unique URL which you can just straight away, right, start using it. So I'll just copy this one. This is the URL to which I want to post this data. Just copy this to the clipboard. Go back to the outbound messages. Let me just put the endpoint URL. That's it. My outbound configuration is completed. Yeah. So I'll just say save. So when you use this webhook, there is something that we have to remember. So when a data is posted from Salesforce to a service endpoint, Salesforce will expect an acknowledgement, ensuring that the data is delivered to this endpoint. So unless if there is an acknowledgement, what Salesforce will do is, right, it will keep on. It will think that the data did not make it to the service endpoint. It will keep retrying. It will keep retrying, as in it will try to send the data again and again for about 24 hours. After which, right, it will stop retrying that message. But Salesforce will keep doing that. So when you configure or when you use this webhook for webhook or any platforms for testing your outbound message, right? What you need to do is you have to configure the response, which in webhook you can do it by just clicking on this edit. So this is the response body. Yeah. So again, this is available right here in our Salesforce, Salesforce documentation, outbound documentation. It exactly tells you the response format that outbound message, right, is expected to receive. Okay. So I just copied this one and click on edit, and in your response body, just paste this one. That's it. I'll give this URL in the description below, the video description below, which you can later cross check. So this is important. Otherwise, when a message is posted, right, you will just keep seeing that you'll keep seeing an error, even though the data is made it to the service. Yeah, just remember this point. So now my outbound message is ready. It's time for us to just create the flow. Let's go back to flow, or I'll just keep this one open. We'll duplicate. Let us create a new flow. Right, let's get a new flow. It's going to be a record triggered flow because I want to update, right? I want to update a contact. I want to update account type, isn't it? So I'll just say I just want Salesforce to just keep a tab on the new account, right? So um, yeah, I can just say a record is created, or I can just use record is created or updated. So either way is right. So if I just use this option, I have to explicitly check how I can, whether the record that triggers this flow is a new record or an existing customer. Okay, I think we wanted to learn how to find whether a record is new or existing. So I'm going to choose this option. Otherwise I can just simply go ahead with this particular configuration. But since we wanted to learn how to find a record whether it is new or existing, let's use this one. Okay, and it's not fast field updates because I have to deal with outbound messages. So I'm going to choose action related records, and most importantly I want to enable this checkbox. So this ensures that a new branch gets created when the flow is created in the canvas. So that helps me to just put the list of things that I need to do, or I need to run asynchronously. So this is done, and let's click on done. As you can see this, right, there are two branches now, run immediately and run asynchronously. Let's first try to do things that needs to happen immediately when a record is created, right? So I'm going to create a resource. Why? Because I want to figure out whether the record that triggers this flow is a new or existing one. There are a few ways to do it. The one simplest way that to do it, right, using a formula variable, I just say b underscore f underscore, it's is new account. So I'm going to name this API, and let's say this is a boolean. Yeah. So we got a formula called is new. So this will help me to find whether the record that triggers this flow is a new record or an existing one. So check syntax followed by done. That's it. So now what I can do is I can just use one of the decision elements, and I can just say check for new customer, and in the outcome I'll just say new customer. So the filter condition is if this formula says it's a new customer, then go with this. Otherwise I'll just say existing customer. Done. So now I got to know other two branches now. So if it is a new customer, then I need to update the account type as prospect, isn't it? So for which I'm going to use update records data element, and I'll just say update account type. So I'll just say that use the account record that triggers the flow, yes, and I'm gonna say account type should be equal to prospect. That's it. So my My core actions are done, right? Things that need to happen immediately when a record is created. So that is done. Now comes that asynchronous part. So let's just click here, and I'm going to use one of the standard core actions, which is the outbound message. Yeah. So when I just key in outbound, right, I can just see the one that we just created, right? This will help us to send data to the legal team, isn't it? So just click here, and we'll just give a description, send prospect count data to legal system. That's it. I'll just say done. So we'll just quickly save this one. I'll just say this is a record triggered. This is a record triggered flow. Just say update type and send data to legal. So that's the name of my flow. I'll just quickly cross check the interview label. Everything is cool. Let's say save, and let's see. So this you prevents activation for the path that is infinitely confused. Yeah, so we got an error. So this error will prevent us from activation. Let's take a look at this error. It says since we have introduced a path that runs asynchronously, we got to configure a condition when this record right needs to be when this path needs to be executed, right? So there is an easy way to fix this one. If you just click on this record, it just takes you to the exact place where we need to make some changes. So when I started creating this flow, I did not give any entry condition, right? But this is expected in this case because we wanted to run a particular path asynchronously, and we also wanted to ensure that this runs only for the new record, right? So what we can simply do is we can just say there is a new condition that we wanted this flow, right, um, to satisfy in order to get it triggered, which is created date. So if the created date is changed, if it is true, then I would like to run this particular flow. So if you just think about it, so created date for a new record, right? So initially there is no created date, and when a new record is created, suddenly it just gets the date and timestamp which the record got created, right? So for any existing customer, any account data, right? If there is a change, if you change any data, certainly the created date will not change. So this will ensure again that this particular flow will run only for new customers and not for existing records, right? So this is pretty much I wanted to add. So once this is done, and let's try to save this. Perfect. Now the error is gone. It's time for us to just activate this and then run a quick test. Let's say activate. Perfect. Now let's go back to the account. So before I do that, so this is still listening. The service endpoint is still listening, and let's go back and then let's try to create a new account. We'll just say um, Candy Crush Limited. I'll give phone number 3. I'll give an account number 555 666, and I'll also try to give a revenue. Let's say it's Lian, and let's give a street and a building city. Let's say it's Troy, and state it's Michigan, postal code 433, billing country is USA. So let's see whether this is getting let's see first the customer type, right, has to be automatically updated to prospect. Number two, we want all these data points to get posted to the service endpoint, basically to the legal system, right? Let's see if it happens. On click of save. Perfect. A new account has been created. Let's cross check. Yes, account has been created and the type has been updated as prospect, right? Now it's time for us to go back and then check whether this data has been posted to the service endpoint. Let's go here, and as you can just see, right? So we got a new message came in, and if you just look at the details, We got the ID of the newly created account. We got the account revenue, billing city, country, state, street, and the name of the account. That's it. So this way, I can use a flow, a record triggered flow, to do to run asynchronously, right? And also use outbound messages to post data to an external system. So before we wrap up, there are a few additional pointers that we should consider. Number one, whenever you configure service endpoint for testing or in your project when there is an API exposed, right? So API exposed, ensure that the format of the response, right, is exactly the same as this. Otherwise, Salesforce guys will think that the record did not make it and will just keep trying again and again to post that same data. So that is the first thing. Number two, output messages is one of the integration approaches, and the two-way data exchange is not possible. As you have just seen, output messages helps us to just push data to an external service endpoint. It does not receive any data from the external endpoint, which we can later process. That is not possible. This is more for one-way exchange, one-way data posting. So number three, in case if the outbound message fails, right, for some reason the service endpoint is down. So what Salesforce will do is automatically there is a retry mechanism. It will just try to post the message again and again until or up to 24 hours. So after that, the message gets automatically deleted. And the last one is authentication. So outbound message, so right now I used open API endpoint, right? Anyone having this endpoint can just post the data, correct? But typically in our projects, what we do is we just ensure that the service endpoint is secure enough. So we enable authentication. The only authentication that is supported is certificate-based authentication if you go with outbound message way of integration. So with that, we have just seen how to run a flow asynchronously and also how to post data to an external system. Thank you.